coming up next.
I think there's a lot of misconceptions around what abuse is. And most people think of abuse as just physical abuse. And while that's dangerous, illegal, scary, most abuse actually isn't physical. Most of abuse is emotional, or what we call psychological abuse. So that's the mind games, the crazy making, the mental coercion. But we also include in things like stalking behaviors, isolation, a few kind of categories that don't fit in very well, like public humiliation, some things like that.
Welcome to Faith Over Addiction podcast, where the chains of fixing and striving are broken and joy is rediscovered in Christ. You are here because you know there's more for you, a life beyond addiction's chaos, rooted in God's peace and promises. This is the place where Christian women like you learn to release the weight of fixing and striving and instead lean into God's strength to create a home filled with love, grace, and hope. She is clothed with strength and dignity. Proverbs 31:25. That's you. You may not feel like it yet, but you are stronger than you know. And God has so much more for you than carrying someone else's addiction. Here, we'll uncover how to set healthy boundaries with love and a little humor, find resilience and grace in the messy moments of life, celebrate small victories, and embrace joy like never before. Lean into God's promises for restoration and strength, because He's not done with your story or your loved ones. This is your invitation to rise up, embrace your worth in God's kingdom, and take back what's been stolen by addiction: your peace, your joy, your future. Your faith is the foundation, and your boundaries are the bridge, and God's truth is your guide. I'm Tanya Gioia, your host and fellow traveler on this journey through the chaos of addiction. I'm here to cheer you on, equip you with tools that work, and share the truth that's changed my life. The joy of the Lord is your strength. Nehemiah 8:10. Together, we'll uncover how to create safe, loving space for healing, starting with your own heart and home. By setting boundaries, trusting God's plan, and embracing His truth, you can reclaim your joy, your peace, and your family's future. Then you will be able to stand firm for your family and legacy as a kingdom daughter. A woman who can laugh at the days to come, knowing her identity is secure in Christ. So grab a cup of coffee or tea and get comfortable. Let's walk this journey together. We're about to take back what's been stolen, create a safe, healing space for you and your family, and rediscover the joy God has waiting for you. Welcome to Faith Over Addiction, where we are looking at your identity in Christ, how to re-find your identity in Christ if you feel that you are not there, and how to help those you love find a safe space, a safe home with you, so that you can set healthy boundaries, so that you can do what you need to do your self-care. And in part of that, when we are dealing with addiction, there can be abuse, there can be domestic violence, there can be issues, and sometimes it's extremely subtle. So I've asked Stacey Womack to start at the very beginning. How do we even decide to define domestic violence, abuse, things that are going on? She is the founder of Abuse Recovery Ministry. Nipuni, can you take this again? Stacey is the founder of Abuse Recovery Ministry and Services, ARMS. So we're going to talk about this in a Christian context. So Stacey, give us a little bit more about your road and your ministry, and then I'd love to dive into domestic violence. We toss that around a lot, but I'm not sure that all of us have a clear understanding of what that is.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate being on here. I'm not a survivor of domestic violence, which is interesting to find out about me. But really, I was raised in the church. My father was a pastor, and God basically just called me to this. So I was like most people who didn't know much about domestic abuse at all. And so I had a lot of learning to do. And, I think there's a lot of misconceptions around what abuse is.
Mm.
And most people think of abuse as just physical abuse. And while that's dangerous, illegal, um, scary,
Yeah.
most abuse actually isn't physical. Most of abuse is emotional or what we call psychological abuse. So that's the mind games, the crazy making, the mental coercion. But we also include in things like stalking behaviors, isolation, a few kind of categories that don't fit in very well, like public humiliation, some things like that. And then a close second is verbal abuse, which, is one of those things that most people don't recognize because everybody's probably done verbal abuse at some point.
Mm.
But someone who is abusive is using a pattern of behaviors to gain power and control in an intimate relationship. So it's not a one-time thing, it's an ongoing thing. And that's everything from the most obvious things like yelling and swearing and put downs and name calling to things that are not as obvious, like the silent treatment as a way to control the conversation, not talk about things they don't want to talk about, countering, where you're always taking the opposite position of the other person, or discounting, like telling their partner, that's not how you feel, that's not what you think. It could be very, very subtle, even to the point, that part of psychological where that undermining isn't outright put downs. It's more like, questioning you. Are you sure? Is that, really, is that what you're going to wear today?
Mm-hmm.
Or when you're cooking, it's like, you sure you don't have that oven up too high? Maybe I should just take care of that for you. Those kinds of like comments that are much more subtle. It's the type of abuse that is so crazy because you can't really explain it to people. It sounds like normal relationship issues, normal marital conflict, but it's not. It really is different. So we have the verbal, the psychological, the physical. We have financial control, hiding accounts or assets, secret purchases, not working, making the other person work or not work, giving their wife an allowance, which is what you do for a child. It's not something you do in an intimate partner, not paying spousal support or child support. And then you have the other side of it, because every category has ones that aren't as obvious, like giving you gifts to get you to come back into the relationship. I've had some women whose husbands have gone out and bought cars once she's separated from him. So it could be
Mm-hmm.
all kinds of things like that. And then we have things like property, and people don't always think of property abuse. It could be as subtle as hiding your keys to make you think you're going crazy. Okay. I had a woman tell me that her husband put the cooking pot in the linen closet to make her think that she was going crazy. So
Mm.
it's not always the destruction of property or the use of weapons, but if it is the use of weapons, it's usually more the threat of the use of the weapon. So
Mm-hmm.
tapping knives while they're arguing.
Mm-hmm.
Or we had one woman who went over to her boyfriend's house and he came out of his bedroom with a sawed-off shotgun and laid it on the table and said, I just don't know what I would do if you left me.
Mm.
That kind of subtle threat in a sense. But it doesn't have to be the destruction of property. It's often things like driving crazy when he gets angry, or maybe sabotaging the car so she can't drive it when she goes out to drive it.
Mm-hmm.
Abuse means the misuse of, so it can be the misuse of anything.
Mm-hmm.
And then as a faith-based organization, we include spiritual abuse, the misuse of scripture, putting somebody down for their theology or their salvation, going to the pastor to discredit her so that she is not believed or thought to be crazy when she finally comes forward with the information. Treating her like a servant, demanded submission, which is not actually, submission can't be demanded. It's something that we give as a
It's
gift.
given. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, and then we include in here any abuse in front of or to a child, because father is the most common analogy used for God. It's not the
Mm-hmm.
only analogy, but it's the most common one. So if your earthly father is harsh, mean, and cruel, then it's really hard to view God as loving, gracious, and kind.
Right.
So it really affects children. And I work with those who use abuse as well. We work mostly with women who've experienced abuse, but we also work with a lot of women and men who have used abusive behaviors. And And I can tell you that the women and men who've come into our program who were sons and daughters of pastors, it really messed them up. There's nothing worse than mixing abuse with faith. It just is very horrible. And then we have animal abuse, and it's not about always harming the animal. In fact, a lot of times it's not. But it could be the threat to get rid of, or getting rid of the threat to harm, or harming the threat to kill or killing, the not feeding or watering, or getting a pet that they're allergic to or afraid of. But a lot of women share with us that he will withhold affection from her while he's being overly affectionate to the pet.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then the other, I think the last category I didn't cover was sexual abuse, which most people get. But again, we have the most common, which would be rape, down to the more subtle forms of sexual abuse, which would be pouting. And our men are always like, well, how is pouting sexual abuse? I'm like, if you pout enough until you've made her life this so horrendous that she gives in, she goes, fine, then you've just coerced her into doing something that she did not want to do. And God did not mean for sex to be used that way. It was meant to be a giving of yourself, not a taking. So we also include things like sexual name calling and pornography and affairs and, anything that goes in that category that would be along those lines. So we talk about it 8 different ways. The misuse of the legal system would kind of fit under financial abuse, but abuse is just the misuse of anything. So you name it, anything can be abused. So that when we take time and we do this more fully in our groups, we talk about this more fully, then women start realizing, oh my gosh, this really is abuse. Where before they didn't think it was because she was being hit. Or the abuser, I've had abusive men tell their partners, this isn't abuse unless you go to the hospital, or it's not abuse unless I break your bones. So it's how it's defined, and most women would not define themselves as a victim of abuse. They would see it as normal marital conflict, and that's why they go to pastors and talk to pastors about it. But pastors aren't trained. Most of them are not trained. And actually, most counselors are not trained in domestic violence specifically.
Can you give us some examples of what is normal? I mean, marriages have conflicts. What is normal, and when does it step across the line with emotional? Let's do the big 3: emotional, financial, and sexual. When does it step across the line? Because you've given us a list that I'm like, whoa, I didn't even put all that together. So let's do, because this is we're gonna try and stick in 30 minutes so people will listen to the whole thing. When you're looking at those big 3, emotional, financial, and sexual, what crosses the line?
Well, I think that probably it could be summed up shortly in the fact that in your relationship, in normal marital conflict, you still feel safe. There's a sense of safety for the most part. I mean, my husband and I have been married a long time, and marriages go in and out of seasons that are good and not so good, and some that are not really not good.
Right.
But I've never felt unsafe with him. And we went to counseling and we did things and worked on things. So on that emotional side, emotional safety is as important as physical safety. If you don't feel safe with your husband, that's wrong, because there is no fear in love. You should feel safest with a person that tells you that he loves you and that you're committed to, and he said he's committed himself to you. So emotionally, there should be that emotional safety. Financially, that's a tough one, because even in regular typical marriage conflict, finance is a really big deal. So when does it become abusive? When it's misused, when it's chronic, it's ongoing, and she doesn't have a say. She doesn't have access to it. We've had women like, he has her sign the tax forms, but she doesn't get to look at them. So there's a point where it's like, okay, this isn't normal. This isn't, if we are one, then everything should be open. There shouldn't be anything hidden. It should be completely, it's us, right? So it's not him or me. And for men that we work with who are abusive, a lot of times they see the money as my money because maybe she stays at home and he works. It's not. You're one, so it's our money no matter what. I can honestly say this isn't easy. My husband and I spend a lot of time working through our own things. I'm more of the tightwad and the careful person with the money, and he's more of the spender. So we're kind of the reverse of that. But we've worked
Right.
through it, and it took a lot of years for us to do that. But we've come up with a way that now we work really well together. But in an abusive relationship, the abuser will never, ever do that with you unless he gets help and makes the changes he needs to make. So abuse is about gaining that power and control and then maintaining that power and control
Mm-hmm.
in whatever ways he needs to. So the other one was which one, Tanya? I said, I knew
Sexual.
sexual. So sexual, again, what would Jesus do?
Mm.
So I think that the struggle is how do we love more like Christ? And that's what we teach our men. What does it look like to love, to truly
Mm-hmm.
love somebody?
Mm-hmm.
So if she isn't wanting to have sex, a lot of times it's because other things have not been happening. The kind of love that she needs to know that she's truly cherished and nurtured and cared for hasn't been happening. So that willingness to wait and be patient, no demanding sex, because again, it's a giving of yourself. And
Mm-hmm.
so it should not be misused. And so that's hard, though. I've had guys go, I have needs. Guys don't have needs, they have wants. And it's just a very strong want. It's stronger than what women have generally, sexually. So, but we should be honoring one another. Sex isn't just physical, it's emotional and spiritual. It's the way God designed it to be. And when you take the other sides out of it, then it's being abused. So it's hard. Yeah.
Let's pause here just a minute. When you're dealing, what is surfacing now, especially in the addiction world, is not just substance, but the videos, the
Yeah.
pornography, the you can't look at my phone, there's things on there
Right.
that I don't want you to see, all of
Mhm.
that secrecy. How do you begin to address that from both sides?
So, we see it with both the men and the women that we serve who have used abusive behaviors. Uh, so we talk about a lot of our clients who come into our intervention programs have coexisting addiction issues. So whether it's drugs and alcohol, whether it's gambling, whether it's pornography, uh, you know, this is something that we tell them they need to go get help for this type of thing. So it's a way to feel better about yourself, even though it's very short-lived and it causes more problems, makes the
Mhm.
relationship worse, it makes the abuse worse. We always tell people that drugs and alcohol don't cause abuse, but they increase the severity and frequency. And I would also say that someone who has a pornography addiction is probably going to increase their sexual misuse because they're putting into themselves and actually changing their brain chemistry,
Mhm.
especially depending on how much they're doing it, how long they've been doing it. So that's gonna creep into their personal lives and their personal sexual lives in their relationships, how that's gonna impact him. He's gonna be seeing her more as an object because that's what happens. So he's gonna want her to do things maybe she's uncomfortable with. He's gonna maybe want her to watch pornography with him, which she doesn't want to do. He's gonna be asking to do things that you wouldn't go, hey, Jesus, come sit down next to me and let's do this together, right?
Yeah.
So it's a misuse of, it's not God honoring. And that's kind of what we're looking at here is what's God honoring and what does true love look like?
If we walk into, so you said the domestic violence program would ask them to go deal with that separately. So how do you work with, because there's multiple different arms that are happening here at once.
Hmm.
Domestic violence doesn't just show up like that.
Hmm.
How do you begin to work with the underlying context that's
Of the
happening?
abuse or of
Well,
the,
in my understanding, at a very basic level, hurt people hurt people. So
hmm.
there's often trauma underneath. The trauma is being masked by the addiction.
Sure.
The addiction is then heightened, the sensory or numb the sensory. It can go either
Right.
way. And then what used to be, I can say to you, Stacey, I'm not a bank robber. You'd probably say the same thing to me. I'm not a bank robber. So I'm doing this behavior that had I not been numbing the trauma with the addiction that's heightening this, I wouldn't be over here doing this. That's not really who I am. So
Sure.
how do you begin to work with all of those arms?
Sure. Abusers do not see themselves as having a problem,
Mm,
period. They don't usually see any of the addiction issues that they have on the side as a problem either. So we start with the women who are experiencing these relationships where the abuse is present, and we begin to walk with her through that process, um, through our Her Journey program, which is available and free, and they can come and just begin to gain their sense of self, because they lose their sense of self in an abusive relationship because they're trying to be who the abuser is telling them to be. And so we're going to walk with her. And as we begin to do that, and as she begins to gain herself back, a lot of times that's when women start setting those boundaries that are so important. And one of the boundaries they can set is, you need to go to this program that deals with your abuse issues, your power and control issues, which is a belief system the men hold, and it's based off of oftentimes what they grew up with.
mm,
The vast majority of our men experienced abuse in their childhood in some form or fashion, or were bullied as adolescents, or in some way it has affected them. So, but they don't think they have a problem, and they're not willing to do it. So it usually takes an outside external pressure for them to come to us. So their wife says, our marriage cannot make it unless you go and you get this dealt with. And usually a separation is a really healthy thing in these situations. And for some of our women, it's like, not only do you need to go to this program, but you also need to go to a drug and alcohol treatment program. And so when she begins to set those boundaries, and again, he doesn't think he has a problem, but she shows him that she's going to follow through with the consequence, that's when these men will actually walk in our door, and they don't think they need to be here. They don't think they have a problem. And they're sure that once we do the intake, we're going to realize that too. But we're here to protect the victim and honor her request. So we have a lot of voluntary guys. We also have court mandated guys and guys through Department of Human Services. But those voluntary guys come in thinking they're different from everybody else, but they're really not. They hold the same belief systems that any of our other guys do. So we want to address those belief systems. And if we can get them over that initial resistance to coming, and get his focus off of her and on himself and his relationship with God, even if he doesn't have much of a relationship with God, we are overtly Christian in our approach.
right.
But we also talk to them about not just knowing, but believing God values you, God loves you, you're important to God, you're respected by God, you're forgiven when you ask for that forgiveness, you're accepted. Because when you believe that, this is true of our men and our women, when you truly believe that you have value, you begin to set those boundaries. And for our men, when they truly believe that God loves them and accepts them, they can start facing that shame they feel over the things they do. Most of our men have no clue that what they're doing is truly abusive when they walk in
Mm,
the door, because
mm-hmm,
they just think it's a normal step and that she's the problem. And if
mm,
she wasn't being this way, that he wouldn't be doing these things.
mm. What do you do for the women who believe that too?
Mhm.
In the if he would just get sober, the kids would be okay, the mortgage would be paid, all of this. Now,
Right.
my personal experience and my client experience has been that's just the start.
Yes.
Sobriety is the start. Recognition of violence is the start. Recognition of bad patterns,
Mhm.
non-biblical patterns is
Right.
just the start.
Right.
How do you pull them away from the idea that the other person is the one that's the problem?
So we talk about in our groups, all our groups, how important it is to have this focus between you and God, because this is all you have control of. You have control of you. God gave you your personal power. So as long as you're focusing outward at another person, you're going to be very unhappy because you have no control over that. And I know even from God dealing with me and my own hurt in my life and stuff, it's like I'm going, yeah, but God, they, and God's going, no, let's talk about you and me. I'm like, yeah, but God, they're the ones who caused the hurt. And God goes, no, let's talk about you and me. And I've got that. And you have to work through trusting God that He's enough for you, no matter what the other person does, whether they make change or not, that God is enough for you and that you are secure in Him. It's really not two halves coming together to make a whole in a relationship. It's two whole people coming together who make a healthy relationship.
I love somebody else talking to that, because I talk about, enmeshment is I've got holes, you've got holes, we're going to try and fix it together, right? Well, we're not each other's saviors and we can't transform.
No.
But if I come in whole and you come in whole, and then we create something completely new,
Yeah.
that's what
Yeah.
God is talking about. We've created a new oneness, a new unity from completely holy, HOLY,
Yes.
ideas rather than holes.
Yeah.
What are you dealing with? So a lot of times you're dealing with power struggles of each person not feeling heard. How do you help them come into that place of, I'm not fighting the right fight for this relationship?
Yeah, I think about there's an older book Patricia Evans wrote, The Verbally Abusive Relationship, and in that book she talks about the difference between personal power and power over. And someone who is in a place of power over mentality, which is the abuser, they never meet you at that level because they're really never interested in working mutually. Because they'd have to give up their power and control to do that. So yes, we all want things our way, and I think that's something that we all need to be honest about. That's being human. But these couples, they do try couples counseling, almost all of them, because that's what we do. Nobody gets into a relationship to see it end. But couples counseling does not work where power and control is the issue. When you're dealing with somebody who's living in a power over mentality, couples counseling is an inappropriate way to handle it, and it doesn't work. I have women who've tried as many as 15 counselors. And those counselors that I trust the most, who are trained in domestic violence, would never do couples counseling. It creates unsafety for the victim. So the best thing that we can do is to separate them and work with them as individuals. And then it's amazing when the person who's living in that power over mentality lets go of that and moves into this place of humility, living like Christ, loving like Christ. All those issues that they came into counseling for, the communication issues, the anger issues, whatever it was, the typical things that we hear, completely go away. They don't even need couples counseling after he's actually done the work that he needs to do. But we do work with women who have power and control issues as well. And sometimes you have this mutual relationship where both parties are mutually using power and control. They're both using types of abuse in the relationship. One's a primary aggressor. That's the one who's gaining power and control. One's a secondary aggressor. They usually don't get too much control. They get more of payback. They do more payback stuff. So he did this to her, so she does this to him. So for instance, one woman, they're fighting and he got the upper hand like most, primary aggressors would get. And so she went and cut the crotch out of every single pair of pants he had. And
Okay.
or
Wow.
another woman who took the pillow and rubbed it all over a cat to lay it on the bed because he had allergies to cats, so he'd wake up with puffy eyes. So they're probably both doing some verbal abuse to one another. Doesn't make it okay, and it's not ever going to be okay that way. So until you can learn, to love yourself and to see yourself as God sees you, how are you going to be able to extend that to someone else?
Absolutely. Let's talk on the other side of the woman who is the fixer. That's
Mhm.
her. She's excellent at problem solving. She's making this work. She's making it look like it needs to look, showing up the church in the
Yep.
right way, all those types of things. And then he goes ahead and he does the work. She doesn't want to give up that role. She doesn't have a job anymore, right? He does
Mhm.
the work, he's managing himself, he's regulated emotionally, and she's the one who is still pushing this because of we do this control
Mhm.
to keep ourselves safe, right?
Right.
Now it's no longer necessary. How
Right.
do you help her unclench?
We talk about the fix it mentality in her journey, and we talk about how it's not our job to fix anybody. The fixer is God. He's the one who fixes things, and we need to let go of that. And I think for her to be able to do that is to grow in her trust that, again, that God is enough for her. I think that letting go of being the fixer is helping her to understand that she has a different place that's healthy and helpful. It's, as you know, Tanya, there's no one easy fix. I can't give you like one easy answer that's
Ah,
just going to fix this for everybody. But in her journey, we really do talk a lot about that and the importance of letting go. So we have in one of our lessons, we have the women actually repeat, my needs are my responsibility, your needs are your responsibility.
yes.
And we have them repeat that several times throughout the lesson. And I've had women write that on their mirrors and with the eyeliner so they could remind themselves to stay in their own camp. And we call it our own yard.
Right.
You stay in your yard. It's not your job to go fix your husband's yard or anybody else's yard. You have a jungle growing in your own yard, and that's what you need to work on. And I see this probably more in our women's recovery program because we're not giving them the same tools that we're giving them in our intervention program for our women called Virtue. And so sometimes those women have a harder time because they would probably benefit from some of the tools that we use in Virtue. They're
Mm-hmm.
because of their own use of power and control. And
Mm-hmm.
we get them in our groups sometimes, and we have to teach our facilitators, our leaders, how do you handle a woman who's coming in the group and being controlling in the group,
Mm-hmm.
so that,
Mm-hmm.
because you can see it when they walk in. And what we tell a lot of our women is that the tools that helped you to survive the abuse are not the same tools that you need to have a healthy relationship. So we have some women who left an abusive relationship, they remarried to a healthy man, but things aren't going well because they're still using the old tools. So
Right.
they
Right.
actually enter our Her Journey program to get some healing so they can let go of some of those tools so that they can have a healthy relationship with this healthy guy.
Right. Right. Absolutely. When you're thinking about that, I really liked how you brought out it could be both. It doesn't have to be one or the other. It's not a classic situation. How would you know if you're in a relationship where it's both? None of us want to look at ourselves as the abuser, but we can also be doing these subtle things that's causing the child, the spouse, the parent, whoever to run away from
Mhm.
us because we are using some of the things you described, either emotional, possibly financial, sexual, those types of things. What happens with those that it's both of them?
Well, I guess I first want to say that for any woman who's listening to this, who's in a relationship that's abusive, they already feel guilty. They already feel like it's their fault because an abuser is telling them it's their fault and they wouldn't be this way or that way. And so I just want to make sure that no matter what they hear today, that they know that whether they're using some abusive behaviors, because it is a learned behavior, you live with someone long enough, you're going to do it yourself. It is a learned behavior, but it never excuses one person's abuse never excuses somebody else's abuse.
Right.
Okay, so I
Absolutely
want to make
right.
sure that they hear that. But if it's a woman here, and when they call in and they say, "Hey, I think I need your intervention program," all I'm going to ask them some questions because we find that the women do better if they do some healing from the abuse they've suffered before we put them into a group where they're going to be talking about how they've misused their power and control. And um, some women don't ever need the other program, the virtue program. Some of them just need her journey. So, I think that um, what happens I don't know why it is more so with the women, because I don't see this with the men, but once you start doing the healing process with the women and you're talking about all types of abuse, later on in their healing process, they'll come up to me and say, Stacey, I'm using some of these things. So they admit to it. Perpetrators don't admit to it.
Right.
or if they admit to it, they don't think they're wrong.
Right.
So that's kind of the difference is what I see is that, I think that they need sometimes to find some healing from the abuse. And it's really hard to heal if you're still living in it. There's no separation. I'm not saying the relationships have to come to an end. I'm just saying that separations where there's power control dynamics, separations are very helpful because it allows you to get your focus off one another and you find out whether or not the other person's really willing to get the help they need. And it takes a long time to change. So these programs for intervention are like a year long.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It takes a long time. And so, but oftentimes when there's a separation and a man comes to a group, he's finally saying the things that she's always wanted him to say. So she lets him come home in 2 months. I'm like, no. I
Right.
tell the women to wait at least 6 months because anybody can behave well, and knowledge does not equal change. She just has new knowledge she didn't have before, but putting it into practice is another thing. So I'm not sure I honestly answered your question there exactly, but a lot of good information nonetheless.
Right. When you're looking at folks, I mean, we're using some pretty heavy terms: victims, perpetrators, survivors, all of that.
Mhm.
What has been your experience of the rebuild? I mean, you've been doing this a long time. Who
Yep.
is it? Just like the big book of AA
Right.
says, it's those who are unable to be honest with themselves that don't
Right.
make it out. What are some signs that when you are taking this person into a program, you're like, they probably are beginning to step into it? What are some hopeful signs that we can see in ourselves, that we can see in our partners and loved
Mhm.
ones? What are those things?
Well, accountability is paramount in these things. So being honest, they're saying, I did this and it was wrong, and I'm sorry, without any caveats of giving any kind of rationalization or justification. Well, I was having a bad day. It was the alcohol. It was the way I was raised. Or if he wouldn't have done this, I wouldn't have that. It's just, I did this. It's wrong. And I'm so sorry for how this impacted you. And then there's the willingness to be patient with you. So when a woman sets a boundary, hey, 6 months, I need 6 months. You need to work on you. I need to work on me. And he goes, hey, we're 2 weeks away from 6 months and I get to move home. And she's going, well, I don't quite feel ready yet. And then he gets angry again. He goes right back to the way he was. And he was just using the program as a controlling behavior.
Mm.
So he didn't really change.
Mm-hmm.
So the men who make the most progress are men who look for accountability on multiple sides. So they're coming to us for working through and learning new tools of how do you actually walk out loving like Christ. And it's very highly accountable. We hold them highly, highly accountable. But they're also going to counseling for any childhood trauma that they
Mm-hmm.
have, because studies show that men who don't deal with their childhood trauma are able to sustain change.
Right.
So, and
Well, let's put that in account.
yeah,
Anybody who doesn't deal with their childhood
true.
trauma has a heart. It's male,
Yes,
female,
you carry it into
unicorns,
your future.
whatever.
Yes, you
Yes.
carry it into your future. And those men are usually also meeting with a pastor, a mentor, someone who holds them accountable. So they are actively seeking accountability. And at first, they're not happy about it, and they want to hurry up and get done. But towards the end, they slow it down. I've had guys stay in the program for more than 2 years and separated for like 4 years. I mean, they're interacting with one another, and he's spending time over there, but he's not living in the house. And I say, what is a year or two if it means having a healthy relationship for the rest of your life?
In a 50, 60, 70-year marriage. I mean, we're
Yeah,
living longer. So
right.
it's kind of like, when we're doing 10 months of carrying a child. What is 10 months of
Hmm.
discomfort when you get this great joy
Right.
at the end of it?
That's right. And so we have couples that do make it, and both of them have to do their work.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
her journey is different than his. And that's why you don't focus on one another, you focus on yourself. So let's say she's working on herself and he starts working on himself, but then he quits. She should continue working on herself, keeping her focus off of what he is or isn't doing, and allowing God to guide her and direct her and what her next steps are. It's a really hard decision.
And I would say that you were talking about men. I imagine you would say the same thing as for men too, because there will be women that start and then say, this is too
Yep,
hard. I don't want to do this. I've got kids to
yep,
raise, this to do, that to do.
yep.
And really what I've seen, and I imagine you've seen it too, it is the repeat of the cycle because the adults are not getting well, so the kids don't have the opportunity to
Right.
be as healthy as they can be. So there's a
Yeah.
there's a bigger reason than just you, your marriage, your connection with God is this
Mhm.
legacy piece. Have you
Right.
seen, you talk about creating safe spaces for survivors and faith communities and all of that. Have you seen in your length of time the children, the grandchildren, those folks be able to break the curse? I mean, isn't that what we're looking for with this?
Sure. One healthy parent can actually do that, who models coming out of a place of unhealth into a healthy place. It's also really helpful for the children when they're surrounded by other healthy adults. And, I know women who've done a great job of parenting their children, the separation, but the ex-husband is still doing abusive things and still throwing her under the bus and to the kids and doing all those things. And the kids are doing well. Now, there's no guarantees with any of this, but there's always hope, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And even a child in the most perfect environment may still make poor choices. may still
Absolutely.
may still get involved in unhealthy relationships. So but I think that having that modeling. So let's say the abuser gets the help he needs, and she's like, Stacey, because she's gone back and forth and back and forth. She goes, I just can't give my heart away one more time. And you know what? We have to honor that, and we have to allow that grieving process to take place. And I've had men to go on to be in healthy relationships that come back and tell me how grateful they are for the program, how much freedom it gave them. And they're in really great relationships. I've had women say the same thing. They go through the healing process, and now they know what healthy should look like, and they're much better
Mhm.
at
Mhm.
being able to tell what's healthy and what's unhealthy. But the longer a person's experienced abuse, let's from childhood on, and into their adulthood, the more work they have to do. The
Mhm.
women who were raised in a healthy home, got into an abusive relationship, it's a faster process usually of healing for them. Usually not as many layers to work through. But
Mhm.
everybody's different and our journey is a little bit different, but God's healing is always there for each one of us, and our heart is to see every person be whole in Christ and when possible for those relationships to continue, but it's not always possible. And I know that's not popular. And as a
Right.
pastor's kid, I get why this is hard for the church, but God has not called us to choose death. He's called us to choose life. And abuse brings death to a person emotionally, not just physically. And a lot of women are dying a very slow death because of the physical health issues they're having from the stress that they are constantly under in an abusive relationship that's non-physical.
Mhm. That it shows up as breast cancer,
Yeah,
as struggles with hips, knees,
yeah,
eating disorders,
absolutely.
all those
Yep.
types of things. So what we talked briefly before this about church hurt, and a lot of churches won't understand this. What am I looking for if I'm looking for a supportive church in my area? Maybe I want to use your program or somebody else's program. How am I vetting a supportive church with a community that can be safe? That,
Mhm.
I've experienced this, but it doesn't look like the classic, that we see. I still need support.
I have hundreds of women who've said, Stacey, I love God, but I hate church. And it's
Mhm.
because the church has not addressed it well. In fact, they've horribly mishandled it. And so some of the women feel like they feel more hurt from their church than they did from their abuser because it should have been a safe place. A lot of times they can't find safety unless they leave that church body because the church decides to either support the abuser or not support either one of them, which still leaves her unsupported.
Mhm.
So I can say this as a pastor's kid and grown up in church that there is no perfect church because it's filled with imperfect people.
Absolutely.
So if a lot of times, if a church is hosting one of our Her Journey classes, a lot of the women will like reconnect with that church, and again, filled with imperfect people. But if the pastor is willing to allow us to lead a group about abuse in there, they might be a little bit more open to it. And if they don't have the answers, they come to us. Which they should do. Pastors do not need to be, they don't need to be experts in everything. In fact, they shouldn't be. There's just too much need out there.
Right. And my pastor has made it very clear he's a non-counseling pastor. That's not his calling. Now he has resources. He will say, here's somebody who I believe in, who's done good work with another congregate, or those types of things. So being aware that there are as you said, pastors can't play the role for everybody.
Right.
And some of them are not counseling pastors. It's just not what they're called to do.
Right.
What is something that a woman who feels like she is struggling today, what is one thing, one very simple thing that she could do today to begin to look at herself, connect herself with God, or look at the relationship that's going on? That doesn't mean I have to turn my life upside down or change where I live or all those types of things.
Well, on our website, we have a how healthy is your relationship kind of quiz, and that can be something they could do. Go in and kind of evaluate their relationship and decide, is this abuse or is this normal conflict? They could give us a call. They could pick up a book. We've written a book called On the Front Lines of Abuse, Strategies for the Faith Community. It's a very small book, goes through the types of abuse, and I tell the readers whether they're someone who's experienced abuse, someone who's using abuse, someone like myself who came into this not knowing anything about it, and even some helps for pastors in there. Really easy thing to do, and it's on Amazon.com. And all the proceeds go directly back to our victim services. So it's owned by the organization. So those are just some simple things they can do. The Her Journey class is free. All they have to do is call. They don't even have to give us their name. Call and they can get started right away. If we don't have something in your area, we have virtual options for every day of the week except for Sunday at the moment. But
that's what I was going to ask.
We love our in-person groups. They're the best. We're also looking for more leaders to train. So I could be led in churches or I could be led in other places, but most of our groups are led in churches, but we also have them in prisons and Union Gospel Rescue Missions and pregnancy centers. And we're national and international with our Women's Her Journey Recovery Program. So we have it translated into Spanish, Russian, Kiswahili, German. Did I say German already? And the newest one, Polish.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah.
Wow. Okay, awesome.
So, yeah.
So how do folks get in touch with you?
They can go to our website at abuserecovery.org, or they can call us at 503-846-9284. But abuserecovery.org has that phone number on there, so that might be easier to remember if they need that. But we have all kinds of information on there, and even little training videos that people could watch and get more information about. So we just have all kinds of helps on there, and we have some PDFs that anybody can download for free. But we're really here to help people and help churches and just help our community find health. And we've been doing this for 27 and a half years, so we've been doing it for a long time.
And where does the website show where you have in-person groups already? I mean, where are you located and where are there in-person groups happening?
So if it's up to date, it will show the state and the county. But because of safety reasons, everybody has to call in and for all that information, whether it's virtual or whether it's in person.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. And then if I'm hearing you, you are a private non-for-profit. This is not court connected, although you do help service some of the courts.
We do. It's crazy. We're in the Northwest. It's very liberal out here, and we are very, like I said, overtly Christian in our approach, and yet we have contracts with community corrections and the Department of Human Services, and they send people to us because God makes a difference and we're doing a good job.
Absolutely. Well, Stacey, thank you so much for your time. We will have all those links below. I'm assuming, as you said, you don't even have to give your name. You can call, get information. Nobody's going to bother you after you've gotten the information. You can go to the website, do what you need to do, and please keep yourself safe, because sometimes just looking for information can
Yeah.
be problematic in the relationship itself. But what we were talking about today was the more subtle forms where you are not in physical danger at that point in time. And
Even
most,
at that, it should be safely done. Maybe at a library or at work or a friend's house.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And if a woman is in physical danger at present, what would be your suggestion?
I would suggest that she contact either us or the local domestic violence agency in her area to help her to safety plan.
Yes.
Because it could be a immediate safety plan, or she needs to leave immediately, or it could be she's got some time to gather some documents and some things and hide them. That's great to be able to do that too. So we have a safety plan that's on our website. I believe they can download too.
Okay, so they can take a look at it in the
Mhm.
privacy, in their own privacy, decide what they want to do. And that's what I always want to tell people. There is help out there. You
Yeah.
are not alone. There is help. You can make these decisions in your time frame and connect with God about what it is that needs to happen. So,
Mhm.
Stacey, thank you again. I really appreciate you being here.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate you having me.
Thanks so much for tuning into the Faith Over Addiction podcast. Remember, nothing changes until something changes. Today is your day to step out in faith and make a difference. You are a daughter of the King, a woman who can spark incredible ripple effects of hope and healing, not just in your own life, but in your family, your community, and God's kingdom. If this episode encouraged you, bless someone else by sharing it. Send it to a friend who needs a little hope, or post it on Instagram and tag me. I'd love to hear what resonated most with you. And hey, if you're ready to reclaim your God-given identity and create a safe, loving space for yourself and those you care about, let's talk. Book a quick call with me today, and I'd love to hear your story and help you take the next step. Oh, and don't forget to head over to Apple Podcasts, search for Faith Over Addiction, and leave me a review. Your feedback not only makes my day, but helps other women find this podcast and step into freedom too. You are strong, you are loved, and the joy of the Lord is your strength. Nehemiah 8:10. Until next time, keep walking boldly into the life God has for you.